to get us started, I'll introduce myself, and then I'm going to have my panelists introduce themselves as we go around for the first question for the sake of time. But I'll just say my name is Trisha Crimmins. I'm a climate tech reporter at Morning Brew. And I also write for their newsletter, Emerging Tech Brew. So if you're in climate tech, which if you're at this conference, I bet you are, you should absolutely subscribe to Tech Brew. So to get started, I just wanted to say a couple of facts about health and sustainability in the Commonwealth. Massachusetts is ranked number 2 in best healthcare in the United States. I'm sure that is somewhat subjective because I know we've got really great healthcare here. And it is the most sustainable state in the United States. So I'm going to get started asking some of our great panelists some questions. So our first question is for everybody. And as I said, introduce yourself before we go. But the link between human health and planetary health is increasingly clear, but translating that into real system-wide change is very complex. So from your perspective, what is the most urgent sustainability challenge the life sciences or healthcare sector must address today? And we can just go in order. So Bob, we'll start with you.
Thank you. I'm Bob Biggio. I'm the Senior Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer at Boston Medical Center. For us, the population we serve is really the most vulnerable to climate change, both from a catastrophic perspective when we have storms, but also things from like heat islanding. And so, you know, if you think about what healthcare reform is asking of our healthcare system today, it's really to go upstream and try and be more proactive about keeping our community healthy. So for us, it's really a direct extension of our mission. So we really start with the basics and you know, really focus on trying to be much more efficient, use our square footage more efficiently, use our energy more efficiently so that we can lower healthcare costs and more directly make investments to go upstream, such as, you know, investing in housing for our patients. So.
We're going to share the mic here, so bear with us. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. My name is Liza Casella, and I am the Vice President of Sales and Organic Growth at Casella Waste Systems. Just briefly about our organization, we're a regional solid waste resource management company celebrating our 50th year in business this year. We're very proud of that. We run 200 operations across 10 states along the eastern seaboard. We are the largest recycler in the Northeast. We recover 1.4 million tons of recycling each year. And a fun fact and a proud fact for us, especially for the group in this room, is for every ton of carbon we emit running our operations, serving our customers, all of you, helping to manage waste and recycling, we prevent 5 times that through our work in recycling, carbon sequestration, and renewable energy. So as I think about that, right, every day we run our trucks to help run society's waste systems, we make the world 5 times greater. So very proud of that fact. And then lastly, we serve customers across North America, helping to advise on operational sustainability economic services to help them run their facilities more efficiently and more sustainably. As I think about the question of what's most critical, you know, from our point of view, our industry serves a very pivotal role in sustainability and circularity. Material and food consumption and disposition represents about 50% of the world's global greenhouse gas emissions. From a healthcare industry perspective, 4.4% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions are associated with the healthcare industry. And as we think about that from a Scope 3 perspective, which is where we really come into play, 71% of Scope 3 emissions from a healthcare perspective is through production, transportation, and disposal. And what we've seen from a manufacturing perspective, up to 60% of Scope 3 emissions from a manufacturing facility can be represented in the disposition of goods and services. All of the impact that's presented once we produce those products, we consume them, and then we dispose of them. So from our perspective, that is a major issue, but it's also a great opportunity, and it's a role that we're excited to play as we touch every sector of the economy. We have the great privilege to be able to align stakeholders across the full supply chain.
I think it's already on.
It's already on? Well, sorry about that. Well, thanks for having me. My name's Tim Deppen. I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff at the Executive Office of Health and Human Services here in Massachusetts. I also serve as our Secretariat or our Executive Office's Climate Officer, which is a position I hope to explain in a little bit more detail as we go on. I think the most critical issue facing all of us in this room as we're thinking about sustainability, and I hope you'll pardon the pun, is how do we make it sustainable? How can sustainability be sustainable in the time we're all living in right now? When I came to EOHHS 2 years ago and started working in this space, a lot of what we heard was around the federal HHS climate pledge. Many hospitals, many health systems in Massachusetts signed on to that. You can't find that climate pledge today. You can't find that website. That has been disappeared. It is gone. And so if your commitment is only on paper, and I'm not saying that's true for anybody who's here right now, but for folks out there, if your commitment is only on paper, it's going to blow away in the headlines that we're facing right now. So I think the most critical issue that we all need to work together on is how do we make these commitments sustainable? How do we ground these commitments? That can look different for different folks, right? But how do we make sure we are committing to our commitments?
Hi, everyone. Jess Vieira from Takeda. Takeda is a global pharmaceutical company with a legacy of over 240 years focused on improving patient health. We focus on sustainability for many of the reasons that Bob mentioned, because we recognize that in order to really improve the health of patients that using our medicines, we also have to create a healthy environment. And so Takeda, like many of our peers, has set very ambitious goals in terms of how we manage our impacts on climate change, with an ambition to reach net zero across our entire value chain by 2040. Now, in terms of some of the challenges facing Takeda as well as our broader industry, if you think about the life sciences, there are a couple of priorities that can make it very difficult to integrate sustainability. We're trying to get products to market to get to patients' needs as fast as possible. We're also a highly regulated industry to ensure that the medicines that are commercialized are safe, that they're high quality, and both of those factors can make it really difficult to make changes, both during product development and also once a product is already on the market. I think despite these challenges, you see companies like Takeda and many of our peers setting these incredibly ambitious goals and making progress by integrating sustainability into our product development processes, and also having those tough conversations and making the investments to go through the process of refiling or improving the process once a product is already launched. I think this brings me to my second challenge, which is when we think about our net zero commitments and our climate goals, over 90% of these impacts are outside of our direct control. These are impacts in our value chain, from our suppliers and their suppliers, but also downstream with our customers. And so this is why I'm really excited about this discussion and some of the partners that we've gathered here in the room, because the only way to really meet these goals and to reduce the climate impacts of our industry so that we can better serve patient health, we have to work together, and we have to solve these problems together and bring forward solutions that not only can we adopt, but all of our value chain partners can also integrate into their businesses. Speaking of one of our value chain partners.
Well said. Hi, all. Matthew Yamatin. I've built a career around taking laggers into leaders. In the last 3 years, I've led the environmental sustainability program at Thermo Fisher Scientific. We're a leader in serving the scientific community when it comes to products and services. When it comes to the most urgent thing that we can do as our part of the value chain, the way we think about it is it really reflects on our mission, which is healthier, cleaner, safer. So for us, it is imperative that we create solutions to help our customers transition away from fossil fuels. And I'll provide a few examples a little bit later. And the intent there is really, how do we mitigate the long-term chronic and acute impacts that really link, again, climate and health?
Wonderful. Thank you, guys. And as Liza was saying, those pesky Scope 3 emissions, Jess, this next question is for you. Takeda has made a lot of progress with its Scope 1 and 2 emissions, but obviously over 90% of emissions do come from Scope 3. So how is Takeda tackling this challenge, particularly when it comes to suppliers and through collaborations that you're driving and advancing, and what lessons can be shared kind of across this whole sector?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think there's 3 different ways that we try to tackle our Scope 3 emissions. The first are things that we can do ourselves. Every organization has decisions within their control that can reduce the footprint of their value chain. We've shifted over 50% of our air freight distribution to sea freight, for example. We're sourcing bio-based solvents. We're looking for packaging materials that come from recycled content or that carry sustainability certifications, for example. But that only gets us, a portion of the way there. A lot of the emissions reduction will have to come from partnering with our suppliers and them pushing these expectations further back in the supply chain to their suppliers and further on. One of the ways that Takeda has done this is to be very clear about our expectations that our suppliers set their own science-based climate targets. Today, over 60% of our emissions come from suppliers that have committed to their own science-based climate targets. And so we're very proud of the momentum this will build to decarbonize our value chain. But we also recognize that not every company is as mature in their climate journey as a Thermo Fisher or some of our other partners that are already committed. And so we work with our peers to develop resources that can be shared with suppliers who are earlier in the journey. One of these things that we've done is we're one of the founding sponsors of a collaboration called Energize, which is managed by Schneider Electric, who I know is very involved in this event, where we're developing resources and actually increasing access to renewable energy for pharmaceutical suppliers. So how do we use our kind of maturity and sometimes purchasing power to structure cohorts and deals where others can get access to those renewable energy sources as well? And then the last piece is really in these hard-to-abate emissions. Even when we look at all of the opportunities we can explore, there are pockets of our value chain where the solutions just don't exist. It's not a matter of scaling or investing. We just don't have the solutions to decarbonize. And that's where we're really trying to hone in and develop partnerships with actors upstream and downstream in our value chain. We'll talk more about some of our work with BMC in a minute to tackle some of these hard-to-abate emission areas like regulated medical waste, which is a big challenge when we look at what happens to our product packaging after a patient uses our medicine.
Wonderful. Okay, so this next one will be for Bob. So BMC is obviously a national leader in sustainable hospital operations. What have you learned from decarbonizing healthcare infrastructure, and how do you balance kind of 3 big important things: operational resilience, patient care, and climate goals?
I think the most important thing is just focus on the basics. We really focus heavily on efficiency, as I said earlier, making sure that we're using our square footage as efficiently as possible to serve the mission of the hospital, and making sure we use sustainable products in the construction of the facility. The work we've done by focusing on the basics around Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions has saved us almost $500 million over the last 14 years, right? So it's been a huge impact that both improves the environment but also helps us increase access to care for the community we serve. So it's a double win for us. The bigger challenge for us is really going upstream to Scope 3, which is where the partnership with Takeda is really important to us, because that's going to require collaboration with many of our different vendors to really look at the products we use, because we use a huge amount of products, as you might imagine, in a hospital. And how are they generated in a way and disposed of in a way that it's more sustainable for our patients and the environment. For resiliency, our infrastructure from an efficiency perspective and resiliency go hand in hand. I mean, it kind of goes without saying since we're a hospital. But, when I started at BMC 14 years ago, it wasn't that long after Hurricane Katrina, for those who remember that. And, like many people, I sat at home on my sofa and kind of watched that unfold. And the vulnerable communities down there, kind of many people felt were kind of left to fend for themselves. At BMC, we made the decision here that given that we're in a very vulnerable city to seawater rise, we can never let that happen here. And so we've made a lot of investments into resiliency, such as we installed a cogeneration unit that allows us to completely disconnect from the grid and do what's called black start and islanding, where we could both heat and cool the facility and provide power for all of our critical patients, even if we had no power in the city. We felt that it was incumbent upon us to be able to be sure that we would be literally the island in the storm in the event of that type of disaster. It's also a much more efficient technology, so it's about 35% more efficient than taking the power off the grid. So even though it does use fossil fuels, it was still a significant improvement. All of that work together, we also did a solar power purchase agreement, has allowed us to decrease our carbon emissions by about 90% over the last 14 years. And so we see this very much as kind of a win-win for both the community, the environment, as well as our patients in the hospital.
Yeah, super impressive. Tim, switching gears to state government, how is the state supporting the decarbonization of healthcare and life sciences? And are there key priorities or any additional ways that the state government and life sciences can collaborate to address some more solutions effectively?
Yeah, thank you so much. And just to take a step back, from that for a second to explain the whole of state government approach that the administration has been taking on the first day. I don't know if it was the first official act, but one of the first official acts of Governor Healy, was to sign an executive order which created the Office of Climate Innovation and Resilience and placed at its head the climate chief, Melissa Hoffer, who's the first state cabinet level official focused on climate and sustainability. And another thing that executive order did was it designated and it mandated that all of the executive offices, or secretariats, I'll try to avoid falling into jargon as much as I can, but it's an occupational hazard, designate someone to be a secretariat climate officer, which is a role that I'm filling. And that person is responsible for taking the priorities, the big initiatives of the administration and making sure they work within their executive office. But I think also very importantly, and something I'm hearing a lot of my co-panelists say, is it's that person's job to integrate climate and sustainability thinking into everything that their executive office, that the agencies within that executive office is doing. And there's a lot of specialized cases, as Bob was talking about, in terms of all the things that a hospital needs to consider as it is thinking about decarbonization as opposed to other areas. So we have worked really, really hard to make sure that we are integrating this thinking among the program teams, the folks who are looking at particular grants, the folks that might be reviewing particular regulations, so that they are bringing to us, they are bringing to those of us who work on this a little bit more full-time, ideas on how we can help to foster decarbonization and sustainability in these spaces. And I think that just makes it a lot more durable. And just to give you a quick example, one of the things our MassHealth, so MassHealth is the state Medicaid provider, team came up with was as a part of their hospital, their acute care hospital contract with the hospitals across Massachusetts, they've added a reporting requirement around, it's mostly scope 1 and scope 2 greenhouse gas emissions. Now that's obviously not going to solve everything, but I think it's a really, really important step. And while we have great visionary leaders here on this panel, in this room, across Massachusetts, there are other folks who struggle to have the bandwidth to think about these items. And so it was a real raise all boats approach. But it ran into a lot of headwinds. It ran into a lot of times where it looks like, maybe it wasn't going to go through. And I worry that if it had been just top-down, top-driven, somebody like me who's pulled in a lot of other directions having to have that sustained focus on it, I'm not sure we would have gotten it through. But we did. And even to this very day, MassHealth actually just released their bulletin to all the hospitals on how they were going to report these emissions to us. Part of that for the emissions was relying on the Energy Star platform. Literally the same day that they released that bulletin, it leaks out that the Trump administration is considering ending Energy Star, right? And so we have to figure out what that means. But I think importantly, we have a team of people who is thinking about what that means and thinking about how we can make this work should it turn out that this platform, hopefully is not, but should it turn out that that's what they meant by that. So when I think about the greatest opportunity or what we're doing, I think the greatest opportunity is we hope to not miss an opportunity. We hope to find all the potential opportunities because folks who are working on these very discrete items that you may not think are climate and sustainability are thinking about them, and we hopefully will be able to seize those opportunities when they come to us.
Absolutely. I too am closely following the Energy Star news. So this next one will be for Matthew. Plastics and waste are obviously a huge challenge in lab settings. I'm wondering, can you give some examples of how Thermo Fisher is implementing material circularity and where you're seeing innovations that can be your own operations or like in partnership with customers?
Definitely, it's a great topic. So I think we first need to acknowledge, and we hear this from our customers, where plastics are very unique in the qualities that they have. The precision needed for laboratory work, to some degree, dictates that we need to use plastic. Okay, so that's acknowledged. So how do we lower the impact? That becomes the question. So I have two great examples that this really seeks to see the innovation that we have going. First example is, how about we use plants instead of fossil fuels to make plastic? It sounds really complicated. It's actually quite simple when you talk to the chemical companies. It ends up being the same molecular composition, which is great. So we actually have, right now, Thermo Fisher has 4 products on the market anybody can buy that are made from plants instead of fossil fuels. And again, going to that, how do we transition away from fossil fuels? The second example is, how do we handle the waste stream? So if we use a lot of plastic, how do we deal with it? So the example we have is our bioprocessing containers, which is basically a flexible membrane that makes a pharmaceutical ingredient that you'll have in any drug. And the intent there is we partner with a waste company who can take those used bags. They will chop them down, and then they'll turn them into a plastic lumber type product. In this case, it's very commonly used to make plastic pallets, and I will say we actually sell those exact plastic pallets on our own website to kind of continue that loop. And then further, we actually use them in our own warehouses. So we're we're making a product, a customer uses it, we take it to the waste hauler makes it into a pallet, and then we use those pallets in our warehouses. So trying to understand that circular loop, that's how that circular loop starts happening. We just need more examples.
Yeah, absolutely. In the interest of time, I'm going to jump to you, Liza, because I want to make sure you have a chance to talk. So what are some of the biggest barriers to improving circularity in healthcare waste streams, kind of from your vantage point, and where are you seeing the most promising innovations or partnerships taking place?
Sure. So I mentioned earlier our role in connecting various aspects of the supply chain because of our unique position serving every sector of the economy. And the panelists here have already touched on a handful of these. So, breaking the supply chain down just a little bit more, what we're seeing as we serve customers, either from a manufacturing perspective or from a healthcare institution standpoint, first and foremost, we design products to be used for patient health. And as a patient, I'm happy about that. But in my role in materials management, it makes it very difficult for us to think about how to recover these very complex material streams with the existing infrastructure that we have. So that's one. Two, from a space perspective, this seems kind of basic, but Bob, you touched on this in terms of the importance of driving efficiency from a square footage perspective. Often waste, it's a cost. It's not a revenue stream. So as we think about trying to break down and segregate waste streams at a hospital, as an example, we often don't have the space needed to do all of the work on site to make a viable product outside of sending it for disposal. Same thing goes in manufacturing. Costs. Often low-cost services are the preferred method, of course. And as we think about increasing recycling, handling difficult-to-manage recyclables, standing up new infrastructure, economies of scale aren't yet there. So often recycling on a per unit basis is higher cost than disposal. And when it's looked at it in a very disparate ways, it's almost always more expensive. Risk, we don't like risk. Changing workflows at a manufacturing facility or changing workflows at a hospital institution is a challenge, so it's slow. And then last, I would say, and Tim, you mentioned this in terms of true sustainability, when we think about demand, the full circle, and Matt, you mentioned this with the work you're doing with Thermo Scientific, we need demand. So if we're able to capture and collect materials and recycle them, we then need demand for that product that we're capturing. And demand can be twofold. One, the global economy. Can we sell this plastic back into the market to make lumber or to make pallets or what have you? But better than that is, can we turn it back into the original product that we consumed? So those are some of the barriers. I'll say that we have a tremendous amount of exciting opportunities and work underway right now at Casella with many partners, both in this industry and others, really trying to dissect point of production to consumption to ultimate disposition and really reverse engineering how that gets done. Those barriers exist, but I can tell you that we've got some exciting programs and pilot work going on across the US right now, really thinking through how do we work the product that's being manufactured into the hospital and healthcare setting, recover and capture it, and turn it back into a stream that can be used both in the commodity market broadly, but back into new products from a medical device perspective.
Wonderful. Okay, we are sub 4 minutes here, so speak with brevity. Our final question is going to be for everyone. We'll start with Bob, and then we'll go down the line. What is the single most important action healthcare or life sciences organizations can take to future-proof their operations and also accelerate sustainability? And for those folks who are not in healthcare or life sciences, what can other sectors learn from what we've talked about here today?
I think the most important thing is start the journey, right? Really start working to move your organization forward. I think the other thing is just to recognize that there's a lot of emerging technologies. Things are really changing. And so try to be flexible with what you install and really do your due diligence on it. But you have to make the best decisions you can and move forward, or we're not going to make the progress that's necessary.
We've heard a lot over the last day and a half about partnership and the notion that no one organization can tackle these complex issues that we're speaking about. And that's probably the broad message, I would say, is lean into partnerships from a supply chain perspective. We all have a role. Get outside your role, understand how your role and the work that you do impacts others, and find those relationships that can help you bridge the gap. There's a lot of great progress being done, but it's going to take everyone partnering and working together to break down the issues.
Yeah, I would say, going off of what Bob said, to start the journey and to continue the journey, to not turn back when things get more difficult. I think it can be really tempting, it can be really easy to do something like that in the current moment that we're in. But I do think it's really crucial that we continue to make the investments we need to make, that we continue to make it. As Liza was saying, that we are thinking about this as part of our role, even if it's not our direct day-to-day responsibility. And then just briefly, from the perspective of the state government, know that you have a partner in this administration. If there are rates or regulations or grants that you think could help foster this type of work, that we are working so that those teams are thinking about this as well, and you won't find a deaf ear.
Addressing these issues is a system problem, and we all see the system from a different perspective. So I would encourage you, especially because I know we have a lot of innovators and entrepreneurs in the room, find that big, messy problem that you know the most about, right? That you have the most visibility into, and then find the partners who can help you solve it. I think that's why we're so excited about this collaboration with BMC. We know that dealing with the end-of-life emissions for our product packaging is a huge challenge for Takeda and our industry, and we don't have the tools or the environment to solve it ourselves. And we know that we'll just get started, but then there will be dozens, if not hundreds, of other partners we'll have to pull into this work in order to really scale and deploy some of the solutions. So there are tons of big, messy problems that really deserve the innovation that we need to really tackle this issue, and we'll all benefit from them. Because at the end of the day, our value chains are just maps of basically the entire economy. So
I think the key takeaway from me is there's an unlimited number of ideas, but we have a limited number of resources to do it. So from Thermo Fisher's perspective, the learning is listen to your stakeholders, find the one or two key things that they care about, their priority, build a strategy around that, and then deliver on that.
Absolutely. I love it. And we're just at time, so it's perfect. So thank you guys all for being here today. If you want to talk to any of our amazing panelists, you can catch them outside the glass doors. But otherwise, have a wonderful rest of the day and go Climate Tech.